she's done or not. After that, she's tohoi to her husband up to the day 80, but she's not allowed to eat truma, and she's not allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash. The night of day 80, till the night of day 80, what is she called? Does anybody remember? Julia. So she's waiting for Shemesh. Normally, when you wait for Shemesh, you're waiting for the night, that night for the sun to set. Here you're waiting. Thank you very much, Rishi. Appreciate it. What's working on your phone? Thank you very much. Normally, Erev Shemesh is something which waits for Nacht. Here we're waiting for Erev Shemesh for 80 days. That means the 80th night is considered the true Erev Shemesh. And then she's mutter to eat Truma, but she's still not 100% toy. There's still one more process. Anybody, what is that? She has to bring a korban, double 2 birds at the very least. Once she's brought the 2 birds, then she's even allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash. But until then, she's not allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash. So Mr. Shem Mashiach comes for every child that you've had. You have to bring 2 korbanos before your wife goes inside the Beis Hamikdash. Oh, Torah says.
More expensive for certain people.
Right. Now, when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to afford double birds for every child and more. And what happens is like this. If Chas V'Shalom, a woman miscarries within the 80 days, then what is the halacha? The Gemara in Krisis brings a special pasuk that since she's not finished Yemei Melois, since she has not finished the entire process of kapora, so therefore anything she miscarries, which normally she'd have to bring extra korbanos for miscarriage, also bring korbanos, since she's still within the 80 days and she's not yet finished the process of tahara, any miscarriage that happens within the 80 days is included in the 2 korbanos she brings at the end. So if she miscarries more than once, she only has to bring 1 set of korbanos. If she miscarries after day 80, from day 81 and onwards, then she has to bring another set of korbanos. Let's say she never managed to get around on day 81 to bring a korban. She didn't get around to she's great figure. She's not mechut figure straight away. Many times women would wait a long time. In fact, Chofni and Pinchas, the sons of Eli, were guilty of the fact they would keep women waiting even longer. But the reality is, let's say she waited day 100. Between day 80 and day 100, she miscarried. Then when she comes to Israel, she has to bring 4 korbanos, not 2. So the Maisa, what happens if she miscarries on the night between day 80 and day 81? And here it's very complicated. The reason being like this. Since it's the night, we all know that once the night is the next day. So it's considered day 81. The night of 81 is already day 81. But could she have already brought the korban? No. A korban cannot be brought during the night, cannot be brought during the day. During the day of day 80, she couldn't have brought it because she hasn't yet finished. It's not yet Erev Shemesh. It's not yet been day 81, so she can't be in the korban of day 81 either. So she's actually in the twilight zone, meaning she's finished the 80 days, but she can't yet have brought the korban of day 81. So the question is, if she miscarries, then does she need to bring a new set of korbanos or not? This is a machlokes b'shama b'silam. The Gemara brings down the entire machlokes, which is not relevant at all to our sugi except for one word, because it says "Amapeles oil shmoinim," and the obvious explanation oil over here means what? The night of the 80th. So it's a once we bring the Mishnah, we explain the whole Mishnah. So let's see the Mishnah inside. Amapeles oil shmoinim ve'echot v'yishamay omi poitim korban. You don't need to bring a korban. Why? They argue that she couldn't yet bring a korban for day 81 because it's not yet day 81. So she's still within the parameters of the first birth. So it's all included. What's the difference between the night and the day? Just like in the day, you would agree with us, you'd have to bring a new set of korbanos because day 81 is already a whole new parsha. So also the night. And furthermore, what happens if she sees blood during that night of the 81? The halacha is that during the first 80 days, whatever she sees, she's mutter. That from the night of 81, she's awesome. So what happens if she saw that night? You'd agree with us, of course, that that's considered a new cycle, a new period, and she has to wait. This is because of the fact that once the day 80 is finished, you can't say it's not by a korban, you can say, well, it's not yet time to bring a new korban. But Gabi Dam, there's no such cheshbon. Same Shiur the Tumah. If regarding the night of 81 and the morning of 81 would have the same halacha Gabi Tumah lo yishvele the korban, would it not be the same halachas for korban? And the more increases explains back and forth what Beis Shammai argue back to Beis Hillel, etc. The Ma'aseh it's machlokes Shammai Beis Hillel. Does she need to bring a new set of korbanos if she miscarries the night of 81? It's not relevant to us. Rashi does bring a little bit more than Shakla V'taya. I'm going to leave it. The Ikka Nekuda is Midikam B'Sel B'Shamai. Ma'ishna Oy Shmonim V'Echad Miyom Shmonim V'Echad. Since to say what's the difference between the night of the 81st and the day of the 81st, Shema Mino Oy Otohu is a vaya that Oy means night. Shema Mino, it's a good vaya. So now actually, if you remember, it's actually the third time the Gemara said Shema Mino, that Oy means night. Now the Gemara brings another one, Meisvei. And I get a tiny bit of a background. That every carbon has a different timeline when you're allowed to eat it. Most carbonas, it's a day and a night. That means the day you shecht it, let's say you shecht it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you've got it till Nacht, and then the whole night. The Chachamim came along and said, till when are you allowed to eat it? Till Chatzos. Why? So if you were to shecht it, you can't shecht it, it's too late, it's past Nacht. If you shecht it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you only get 9 hours. The one very big exception is Shlomim. Shlomim, you get 2 days and 1 night. And if you think about it carefully, it comes out quite different. Because let's say you take a Toido or Chatos, or Osham, all these kabbonis, you eat it the day and the following night. Shlomim, you eat it the day, the night, the day. So it comes out that Shlomim, you stop eating it when? At the end of a day. While all the other kabbonis, you finish eating it at the end of a night, or halfway through the night. That's the machlek, because we pass in Shiur lechumma. But right, so let's get to the point. So it comes out this. Now we've got 2 shilas over here regarding when are you going to burn it as noisa, when it's got a shilah of noisa, and what about a shlomim? Can you eat it the next night? You could say a logic like this. The Torah says chatos, oshom, toidot, you're allowed to eat the day and the following night. So shlomim that you're allowed to eat it for 2 days. Maybe I should also be allowed to eat it the following night as well. Well, that's one question. And another question is, when are you going to do the burning of the noisa? Whenever you have leftover korban, there's a chiyuv to burn the leftover korban. And again, it's not relevant to our sugya. The only word we're interested in is the word oy. And again, we're going to prove that oy means night. So let's see the Mishnah inside. Meisvei. Yochel, you might have thought that a korban shlomim should be eaten the night of the 3rd night. But do know, and it's logical. What's the logic? Most korbanos eaten from 1 day. The shlomim can be eaten for 2 days. Just like by most korbanos, you're allowed to eat it the day and the following night. Just like all korbanos are for 1 day and the following night, so by shlomim 2 days and the following night, so it should be logical. Talmud loima. No, because the logic is that the Torah says give you a day plus a night. So over here the Torah says clearly give you 2 days. So maybe the Torah meant also the night after. Talmud loima. We have an explicit pasuk. And the way we darshan is ad yom normally means till the day. Here we're dashing ba'od yom hu nechal, not ad yom till the day, but ad yom while it's day, ba'od yom while it's still day, ba'od yom hu nechal v'nechal lo shlishi. So you're not allowed to eat a shlomim on the 3rd night. You're allowed to eat it for 2 days, and you're not allowed to eat it. Agav, this is asked Hashem Bochas. Why didn't we stop people eating shlomim midday, just like we stopped people eating a korban midnight? Anybody want to say the poshta logic which Tesa says? By a normal korban, you have to eat day and a night. You have to stop by midnight. By Shlom, you have to eat 2 days and 1 night.
Less color, midday going on. When it comes to night,
more explicit. The difference between midday, the day finishing, everybody sees because they see the sun setting. Midnight, you can't really tell when it's midnight, when it's 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. So before you know it, you could be eating and you could end up like a shach. Okay, now Ma'aseh Shlom, you're allowed to eat it 2 days in the middle night, but not the night after. It's a possible. And the normal korban, you're allowed to eat it that day and that night. Says the Gemara, another question. Maybe you should burn the shlomim straight away. When would that be? That night, the evening after the 2 days. But it's logical as well. Most kabbalas eat for a day and a night. Shlomim is eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Just like most kabbalas take it for achila sreifa, immediately after you eat it, you burn it. Why? What's the halacha? You eat it the day, the following night, and then the next day you burn it. Afkan take it l'achila sreifa immediately after the time that you're allowed to eat it, you should burn it. On the 3rd day you should burn it. So we've learned 2 halachas regarding a shlomim. Somebody will say to you, I'm allowed to eat a shlomim the night after the 2 days. You say to him, no. Oh, what's the logic? Why it's different malchus? But why it's still day? Should I burn it that night, the noisa? No. By Yom HaShlishi, you only do the burning of the noisa on the 3rd day. Okay. So Maisa says the Gemara, Mida Ka'oma Yenech Oil HaShlishi. Since it says that Oil HaShlishi means the 3rd night, also. This is the fourth proof. Mami no, it's another proof that Oil means night. Toshima, another proof. Oil Shalem HaKippurim, the night of Yom Kippur, that's the night of Kol Nidre. Mispalel Sheva, you only make 7 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, like we do on Yom Tov. We only do 7 brachas. The first 3, the last 3, and the middle bracha of the Yom Tov or the Shabbos. Umisvada, and you say Vidui. Shachris in the morning, Mispalel Sheva Misvada, 7 brachas and do Vidui. Bemusaf, Mispalel Sheva Misvada. Bemincha, Mispalel Sheva Misvada, 7 brachas and do Vidui. And that goes with Tzionim and others point out you should carry on. Bene'ila, some people don't have it in the Gemaras, but it should be put in the Gemara. By Ne'ila, you daven 7 Misvada, Mispalel Sheva Misvada. Be'alvis, Motzei Yom Kippur. What do we daven Motzei Yom Kippur? Mispalel me'en Shemona Esrei. You do a shortened version of Shemona Esrei. Anybody want to suggest why would you do a shortened version of Shemona Esrei, Motzei Yom Kippur? So if you can eat quicker, people are tired, they fasted a long day, so they told everybody to daven a short Shemona Esrei. If he disagrees, Mispalel Shemona Esrei Shleimos, you have to do a full Shemona Esrei like we do. Why? You have to say Havdalah, you say Atochanan Tanu and Atochanin. And if you do a shortened version, the shortened version is called Habinenu. We had it in brachas, where you say all the middle brachas of Shemona Esrei in one short paragraph. If that would be the case, where would you be able to slip in Atochanan Tanu, which tells us the halachas of Havdalah? You would have no time to fit it in. And since it's important to mention Havdalah, so therefore we have no choice but to say that you have to say the long Shemona Esrei, and that's how we pass them. So in Motzei Yom Kippur we do the long Shemona Esrei in order to be able to say Havdalah, that is Atochanan Tanu in Chinyan Adas and the Bach of Chinyan Adas. Alma, again we have a proof. Oy also the night. Oy means a night, because if you look at the beginning of that verse, it says Oy Shalem HaKippurim, the night of Yom Kippur. You say 7 Shmamino. Toshima, another proof. The Tani Debei Shmur. Leila Abosa, the night of the 14th, you check the chometz by candlelight. Alma Oy Otohu, we see that Oy means the night. Now this proof is the strongest of them all. All the other proofs, you could say that Oy can mean day, can mean night. And there they choose it to mean day or night. But here it says clearly that when do you check for chometz? The night.
Wasn't that learned out of the Mishnah?
No, because the Mishnah said Oy La Abos. And we don't know does the word Oy mean night or day. But oh, no, he's not. No, it's Tani. Tani's Shmuel means that Shmuel had a brisa saying the following statement. So the brisa says clearly that when do you look for chometz? The night. So now you can't argue anymore. Why did we get in the beginning? We wanted to give you an extra schus to learn all about Mapelas and Yom Kippur's Vidui, and also we spoke about it yesterday that they had a different bottom of Roshim, etc. Elo. Everybody agrees that Oy means night. Each person spoke with the language of his town. Everybody agrees Oy means night. When he said the word Nagi, it doesn't mean day. Nagi means night. Just in his town, that's how they spoke. Oh, Nagi means morning. The answer is in his town, they always used to speak euphemistically, and whenever they spoke about the night, they would call it daytime. When they would say day, they meant night as to make people not speak negatively. So again, so Mishnah again, let's go now right to the beginning. Mishnah said, night of the 14th. We had the question, what's the word Oy mean? Does it mean Leili or Nagi? Does it mean night or day? The Gemara says, no, everybody agrees it means night. So why did he call it Nagi, which means like morning? Answer is he meant night. He called it Nagi because in his hometown, that's how they used to refer it, not to put it down. There's the Gemara, the Tana Didan, so our Mishnah. My Tana Lektani Leili. Why not just use the word Leila Ba'asa? Why use the word Oila Ba'asa and give us a whole day and a half of trying to establish what the word Oy means? Just say Leila Ba'asa, and then it will already be up to here straight away. Says the Gemara. We want to use a clean, pleasant language. And this, when the person, others point out, there's nothing negative, nothing bad about saying Laila. He says it's the beginning of a Masechta. Beginning of a Masechta, we do not want to start off with a Leila Basa, the night of our boss. We want to talk about Oila Basa, the light of the 14th. So then they say like this, or Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi. Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi, therefore, is not a proof to this idea, but it's just a similar idea. It's a place where we see a similar concept. A person should never speak in an unpleasant, disgraceful manner. The Torah spoke in a long way, and the Ben Yehuda adds, Okam is crooked. It spoke in a complicated and in a lengthier manner, not to say a negative language. By Noach, it says that you should take from the animals which are Torah and animals which are not Torah. It could have said to male, which is shorter and easier to understand. We'll see. So why does the Torah speak like that? Because he shouldn't speak Dvarim Gunam Mipiv. We actually once discussed this with him. Previous Masechta, and we mentioned that the Rambam writes Pirush HaMishnah is an unbelievable thing. In the Hakdama to Pirush HaMishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Anossi was zeicher to write the Mishnah for many reasons. One of them being that he had a beautiful, clean language. And it's a very, very important thing. The Ben Yehuda got Arichos, that pei is Yud Hey at the end. If you were to write pei in full, the way you'd write it is pei Yud Hey, that's how you write it. If you mix the words, what is Yofe, that only nice speech is royal to be called pei. That we see, I'm going to have now a very, very long more. For the rest of today is only going to be speaking about the fact that when the person speaks, he has to speak in a clean way, in a pleasant way. It's a very choshva thing to say. I hope it's not to offend anybody. I saw this his daughter came in and she spoke in a very, very bad language. And the husband turned to his wife and he said to his wife, and he used a few swear words, beep, 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 did she ever learn to speak like this? The answer is, when the person speaks like that, it has a very detrimental effect. People afterwards realize this is the way they speak. We see the tremendous thing. Now we're going to have a longer more. That's the whole reason. Why not say Leila Bosa? Because we want to speak in a clean language. And now we're going to have a long avichus about this. Does it go like this?
We're talking about the Skrokos, the whole of Shas with Memo Saker and Shma Ba'arvis.
Oh, Memo Saker and Shma Ba'arvis. It's not the first word. And maybe Arvis not necessarily the same as word as Lilo. I hear. It's interesting how. Sometimes the Torah adds 9 letters. Shenema, because it says and it could have said Asher Tomi. The fact that it says Asher Toy is extra 9 letters. 10 letters Vov to Toy. Because the Pasuk actually says the word Toy with a Vov. It could have used the word Tomei. The first mandoma says Toy can be without a Vov. So the Torah added the Vov, it was not necessary. But here it says the word, the Vov of Toy, if you count it, it comes to 10 letters. 16 letters, Shenema, by David HaMelech, by Shaul HaMelech, when he was wondering where was David. So the first day of Rosh Chodesh, we always read it by Mocha Chodesh, whenever Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday. After Mikveh who built it Torah who kilo Torah, that Shaul said maybe he wasn't Torah and that's why he didn't come and didn't say the word Tomei. Tani Dvei Rabbi Shmuel, elaborating on this topic. A person should always speak in a clean language. The halacha is that a zov or a zova, that's a man or a woman that sees a certain kind of discharge, can make them Tomei. There's a special halacha called Merkav and Moishav. Merkav and Moishav is that it is possible to make something Tomei without even touching it. If, for example, they sit on the couch, if they have 10 pillows, one on top of the other, all 10 pillows and the couch become Tomei. Similarly, if they ride on a donkey, on a saddle, on a camel, it all becomes Tomei, not the animal, but the saddle. Now, they both have identical halachas. There's no halacha difference between a zov and a zova. They have identical halachas. Yet, when the Torah talks about a zov, it talks both about merkav and moishav, riding and sitting. By a zova, it doesn't mention riding. Let's see the Gemara inside. It only mentions the word moishav. Just say very briefly, Rabbi Yosef's got a famous truth about wearing trousers. The woman wearing trousers. The truth of the matter is And one could argue that wearing trousers covers more than wearing sometimes a skirt with short exception. The problem is the Rishonim on this Gemara say, what's so terrible about saying the word merkav by a woman, riding by a woman? So Rashi already mentions it. So Rashi says, because if you look at Rashi, mentioning riding, you have to then you're hinting, you're mentioning the fact that a woman's legs are parted, which is a certain lack of tznius. So the point is that is the real reason why a woman who wears trousers, even if it covers more, but it reminds more one of a certain lack of tznius, and therefore it's forbidden. Okay, but the Maisa, so the Gemara says that we see that the Torah doesn't mention merkab by a woman, so therefore it's because of the fact that the Torah wants to keep as much as possible to speak Lashon Nekiah. And we've got another proof, and the Gemara later will ask, why do you need more than one proof? That Tivcha Lashon Avumim, Hashem chooses the language of Tamidei Chachamim. Avumim is they speak a nice language. And another proof, the Das Fosai, the knowledge of my lips, Bo Milelu, speak with clarity and cleanliness. My V'oima, why do you have to have another V'oima? That's when it comes to the halachas of the Torah. But words of Tamidei Chachamim doesn't need to be as careful. Not just the words of Torah, but the words of Tamidei Chachamim have to be clean. Words of Tamidei Chachamim, when it comes to just general language, when you're just talking about the weather or the politics, maybe not. The Mashor explains the word sfosai means that which comes from my lips. Anything that comes out of my lips will be bo'u milelu, will be spoken with cleanliness and clarity. So we have three mekoros, one from the Torah, one the Divrei Chachamim, and one that all language, whatever a person speaks about, should always be in a lashon of bo'u milelu, should always be clean. Does the Torah never mention riding by a woman? It does say it. They wrote on the camels. There, by a camel, the Torah has no choice. Why? Because camels, if you ever ride on a camel, it's much, much higher. Since it's very high, women are scared. They have no choice. That means the way the Tosfos explains it a little bit, this bottom Tosfos, that normally a woman, the correct way for a woman to ride a horse or a donkey is to keep both legs on one side. A side saddle, is that what it's called?
Have you ever seen the Queen of Rain?
Yes, I've never seen the Queen.
Yeah, if you ever see the Queen, that's how it's
She doesn't survive me for tea.
She rides, no, they've got a special saddle.
Ah,
They
saddle,
keep both
right.
legs on the side.
Oh, so that's the correct way. When it comes to a camel, which is very high, then they've got no choice. They're scared, so they put one leg on each side because it keeps them more stable. By the sons, and it says on a donkey, which is not so tall. Hasam says the more top of Gimel Amud base, Mishum Bono, because his sons were there. That was normal. His sons rode in the normal way. This is an interesting story of Abigail, who was the wife of Novel. Novel was a very big Rosh, and David HaMelech planned to do what to him? To kill him. And Abigail came to him and said, please don't. And in fact, David HaMelech never killed him. So she came riding all day and all night, and she came to meet David HaMelech to plead with him not to kill her husband. And it says, she was scared. She rode through the night. She was scared. She wasn't scared of the night. She was scared of David. She was scared of going up the mountain. Okay, so we see that when we're forced to use a language which we have no choice, therefore we have to use the language which is necessary. Does the Torah not say the word Tomei? And where does the Torah say the word Tomei? It does. When it comes to the halachas of the Tomei animals, it says Behemot Tomeo. And there's a famous word that when it comes to Noach, we're just discussing which animals stick in the table, then it's not necessary to say Torah and Tomei. You can speak in a very clean language. But when we're telling you that this is Tomei, then it's not good enough to speak in roundabout language. We have to say, this is Tomei, this is Asa. That person should be aware. A person has to sometimes speak the truth. So Maisa we see, when it's exactly the same length, we speak in clean language. Okay. When it's going to be a longer language, we speak the shorter. That means there's two values. There's a value in speaking in short, concise, and there's a value in speaking in clean. So whether it's the equal, then we speak the more clean language. When it's going to be a longer round, then we end up speaking B'Lashon. Then we have to do whatever is shorter. So you're going to shout to me and say, wait a second, a minute ago you just told us that by the Torah by Noach and Ashalei Torah 8 letters, 9 letters, or even more letters. So Tos asks the Kasha, top Tosfos, and Tos explains, the Torah had to, at least in some places, write a longer way to show you how important it is, that even if it's a longer version. But that's why sometimes the Torah wrote it the longer version, but not always. So again, it's a difficult thing to digest. When sometimes the Torah had to write it in the longer way. Why? Because otherwise the Torah knew that if it's not longer, a person will end up not realizing the value of it. Once the Torah has it the longer way, sometimes then the Torah can say, right now, we're going to stick to whatever short. A person should always speak as much as possible in a shortened language. A person should always speak le'olam. When Yehuda asks the question, why le'olam? He says to tell you what it's doing. As much as possible, a person has to try to be concise. Because when a person speaks so long, it burdens a person's mind, and then the person is not able to digest it. Okay. Says where it's equal do we speak in Lashon Kavod? They're exactly the same. And says more it says it without a vav, and since it says it without a vav, therefore it is shorter to say v'cheves without Yosheves. Okay. Says Tosfos, let's just second Tosfos, the could have said that Yesheves without a vav. Answers Tosfos, no. Yesheves without a vav is not. It is always used to mean a limited Yesheves. For example, Lot Yoshev Shastem, which we dash on that what that day became a shofet. Or Efon Yoshev V'Seich B'Deiches. I'm sure you all do. What is Efon Yoshev V'Seich B'Deiches teachers? That only because Avam needed him, he became appointed to be amongst the. Okay, so Yesheves without a vav is always darshan for something. So for the Torah did not want to mention Yesheves without a vav. Okay, says the Gemara. How do you treat Talmidi? There were two Talmidim that Yossi Kaveh Vav sitting in front of Vav. Chad Omar Shevitin Haishmate Kedovacha Mesanka. This Gemara has made me so tired. It's made me like an exhausted Dovacha. Dovacha is a chaza, like an exhausted chaza, exhausted pig. Can you imagine speaking like such a language? This Gemara was so difficult that it made me like an exhausted Dovacha, like exhausted. One does want to use the word chaza, because even the word chaza is considered not Lashon Nekiah. Dovacha.
He used Dovacha, he used Chaza.
I think he used the word Dovacha. B'chad Omar, the other one said Shvitin Haishmaita, that this Gemara made me so tired, Kigdim Esanka, like an exhausted goat. Vav stopped speaking to this other Talmud who used an unclean language. Navik says he didn't speak to him for 30 days. I mean, he never spoke to him again. For 30 days, he never spoke to him because he once used the language, I'm exhausted as a Dava Acha, which is tired. Says it go like this. How do you treat Tabidi Daviyossi Kabei Tehillah? There were two Tabidi in front of Hillel. One of them was Yochanan ben Zakkai. Some say there were two Tabidi in front of Rebbe, and some say it was Rabbi Yochanan. Chad Omar, they asked the following question. The Gemara doesn't even tell us the answer, but to understand the question, we have to have a tiny bit of background. The halacha is, for something to become tummy, an apple, an orange, something has to happen first. We've had it many times. It has to get wet. After it's been plucked from the tree. That means, if you take an apple, it's got rained on it 1,000 times, but it's never got wet after it got plucked from the tree, it cannot become tummy, even if a dead person touches it. That is called hechsha. Oh, and it has to be wet with desire, meaning that you want it to get wet. So let's say you pluck an apple off the tree, you don't want it to get wet, and it got wet, and then afterwards a dead person touched it, the apple is 100% tohi. This is called the idea of hechsha tumah. For something to become tummy, it has to at least once become wet. There's a mission that talks about the fact that when you pluck grapes, then what happens is, we are concerned that when you pluck grapes, what happens? The juice of the grapes runs. When you pluck a lot of grapes, a lot of juice comes. So the grapes inevitably will get wet. So if you want to be able to have those grapes betara, what you're going to have to do, make sure that the cups and the bowls and everything that you use to pluck the grapes are all Torah. But when it comes to olives, there's no problem. You can even use a Tomei bowl to pluck your olives. Our juice will run out on them. The Gemara doesn't even tell us the answer. Tosfos, it's the third Tosfos. We're going to do every Tosfos, I think, on this page. Tosfos says that what's Tosfos say? That what's the difference? Can anybody guess what's the difference between the juice of grapes flowing and the juice of olives? Yeah, olive oil is one of the liquids. Oh, juice of a grape is tasty immediately, and therefore a person might enjoy it. It's geschmack juice. A person wants the juice. As I hinted already, olive, it's only when it's been pressed that there's a certain liquid that you get when you pull off olives. It's not real oil. It's not geschmack oil. So again, let's get it clear. For something to become tomei, it has to get moist with the liquid that you want. By grapes, the reality is you want the juice. Since you want the juice, therefore, everything, you have to make sure that it's tohu. You have to use a tohu bowl, you have to use a tohu knife, otherwise the grapes will become tomei. By olives, since you don't want the juice, so therefore the juice is not important, so therefore the olives are not mukhshal lekabetuma because they never got moist. So therefore, even if you use a tomei bowl to cut your olives, you're okay. Now, both of them had the question, two Talmidim, they both had exactly the same question. What's the difference between grapes and olives? Had you been there, you would have told them the difference between grapes and olives, the difference between grape juice and olive juice. But the Gemara doesn't even discuss the answer. The Gemara just discusses how they phrase the question. So the Gemara says like this. Chad Omar once said, in English, harvesting, there's no difference between harvesting grapes and harvesting wheat and harvesting olives in English, as far as I'm aware. In Lashon HaKodesh, you've seen Baba Bas has a whole Mishnah. Every kind of fruit has a different word, which all means harvest, right? Koitze is for tvur, boitze is for grapes, moisek is for olives, goide is for figs. Every single produce has a different word, and each one of it just means to harvest. Doesn't mean anything more than that. So they asked the question: if they ma boitzen betahara, why, when you pluck grapes, why, when you harvest grapes, do you have to make sure that everything is toy? But you don't need to be careful when you pluck olives to do a betahara. The other one asked the same question using a different language. He used the word tomei. Why, when it comes to olives, are you allowed to use tomei? They were both asking the same question. One just asked the question, why one betahara and one you don't need tahara? Another one said, why the one betahara, one betumah? Omar muftachani bozeh, I'm sure that the first one, shemoiro hiro b'Yisrael, he'll become a pesach in Klal Yisrael. Lo Yomi mo'otim ad shehiro hiro b'Yisrael. It didn't take long until it became a huge pesach in Klal Yisrael. And again, you have to ask the question. You would expect that somebody who speaks Beloshin Nekiah would become a tzaddik, Yivei Shomayim. But moiro hiro is a matter of knowing language, and knowing Torah, knowing Chochmah. So it says because a person is not koina Chochmah unless he's an ish noki. And when a person's noki, so therefore he's koina Chochmah. And that's why he said moiro hiro b'Yisrael. To be part of Klal Yisrael's moiro hiro, you have to speak in a clean language. So until he became a big person, just because we use a cleaner language. Hanut Losakani, there were three Kohanim discussing how much they got from the lechem upon him. How many breads were the lechem upon him? 12 loaves. How many Kohanim got to eat from it? All the Kohanim, all the people that Mishnah. So everyone got a tiny, tiny amount. In fact, when the Chinuch asks that since there's a mitzvah of achila, and the mitzvah of achila is always mekazais, how would the mekan mitzvah of achila? It's a famous lomdas. No, there's nest that they felt full. But how would mekan mitzvah of achila? You can't eat if you're eating less than kazais. No, but achila, you have to eat. Okay, I'll get you off the point. Again, the lechem upon him, everybody got a tiny amount. So three Kohanim discussing how much they got. So one Kohen said, Chad Omar Lahu, Igani Kapul, I got like the size of a bean. Chad Omar Igani Kizais, I got like the size of an olive. Chad Omar Igani Kizov Alato, I got like the tail of a lizard. He got from the lechem upon him like the tail of a lizard. They checked after him, they found there was something wrong with this Kohen. Look into his Shemetz Pesul, he says, Shimsu v'Komer, that unfortunately there were Kohanim that served Avodah Zarah and then wanted to serve the Beis Hamikdash. And the halacha is a Kohen who serves Avodah Zarah is also to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, unless it was a complete oinus. But generally, a Kohen who served Avodah Zarah, it's the Gemara and Menachos and the Menachos, is not allowed to serve the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, they found about this Kohen who spoke negatively about the lechem upon him, that he ate like the tail of a lizard. The halacha is that once, if a person needs to marry somebody, especially a Kohen, you need to make sure that she's Jewish. How do you check it? So there's different ways. If you know that her father served on the Mizbeach, you don't need to check any further. So you don't check above the Mizbeach. It means you don't check an ancestry above the Mizbeach. So why would we check this Kohen? He obviously must have been working the Beis Hamikdash to get the lechem upon him. So why do we have to check him? How can you say we found something wrong with him? We don't check a Kohen once he's been in the Beis Hamikdash. It means he was a Baal Gaiva. They found about him he had bad midas. Normally we don't check a Kohen. Once we know a Kohen served the Beis Hamikdash, that's it. It's guaranteed that he's a meyuchas, he's a good person. But this Kohen, by speaking in such a terrible language, speaking that about the lechem upon him, they got like a tail of a lizard. So there was a reason that something wrong with him, and therefore we had to check him again. And now we have a story which I have to tell you. There's probably more droshes on this Gemara than on any other Gemara in Pesachim. It was amazing Gemara. What did you say? Yeah, they found that it was a cholon. Can you imagine such a thing? They found that there was something possible about it. That's called the second mad pshat, not the first pshat. Shachatz means it was just a Baal Gaiva. Gas ruach bein roy l'shamash. That means it was a Baal Gaiva. The other pshat, so is taken that it was really a cholon. It was taken not even royal for a kohen. It was a possible kohen. Ahu Armo. There was this guy. He would go to Yerushalayim and he would eat the common Pesach. I'm going to go through the whole story and afterwards we'll examine all the lamdas there is. So he would eat common Pesach Yerushalayim. The guy is not allowed to eat. Another pasuk. I get to eat the best part of the common Pesach. Do they give you the tail? Now the tail of the goat was brought in this back, but the tail of the sheep was not, which is the second to bottom Tosfos. But a Maisa, most common Pesach was a sheep. So he tried to trick him. He said to him, "Did they give you the tail?" They didn't give you the tail. I said, "You should ask for the tail." I want to eat from the tail. Give me from the tail. Who was one who advised you to ask for the tail? It was Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir. My high to come on. What's going on over here? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir is not a fool. He wouldn't have told him to eat from the tail. He knows the tail goes in the Mizbeach. They found out he was a goy. They killed him. Peace to you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir. You're a Netzivim, and your net is spread in Yerushalayim. So the connection to this Gemara, to previous Gemara, is that the goy, by speaking in a negative language, ended up getting killed. There's many questions in this one, much lomdas. One fascinating thing that Chas Chinuch discuss is what right did they have to kill this goy? Now you all shout, of course, he was over on the apostle, but a goy is not allowed to eat from the common Pesach. Oh, he was going to kill them? How would he kill them? There was one goy amongst thousands of Eden. Yeah, I don't. Nobody says your pshatim. I'm afraid I've seen many pshatim. Again, why did they kill him? So say because says Chas Chinuch, he can't say that. A goy's got 7 mitzvahs. It's not his job to tell Yidden how to behave. It was a problem with the Yidden for feeding the goy. That means they were doing that. If you invite a goy to your common Pesach, who's done that? The Yid, not the goy. So how can you say the goy is Chayav Misa? Okay, so it was that very b'shegi, but why should the goy get killed? So the Chas Chinuch says a fascinating svar. He says, because he obviously must have paid to be part of the chabur. If I cheat you, for example, I say to you, let me join your chabur, and I'm a yid, but really I'm a goy. So then it's a mekach tos. So therefore I don't really deserve to own part of common Pesach. If it's a mekach tos, then I don't own it. If I don't own it, so when I ate it, I stole from you. And the Rambam writes, if a goy steals even the most minute amount, it's Chayav Misa. So it's Chayav Misa because of the fact that he stole. That's what. And then he brings some others, a whole different cheshbon. The Gemara tells us, I think it's in Talmud, that what happens is there were certain things that Kohanim used to sometimes kill people for no reason, out of anger that somebody was mavaza kodshim. For example, if a Kohen would come to Beis Hamikdash when he was Tomei, which is not towards Chayav Misa, they would kill him, points in the smoicha, they would smash his brains out of anger. That how can you do such a thing? You're coming to Beis Hamikdash Tomei. Over here, it was a matter of anger that a Goy would have the chutzpah. That's one topic. What was the right to kill him? That's one topic. It's an interesting topic. It's just a new one. And there's many different mephoshim about that. There's a very interesting Tosfos here. This is the fourth Tosfos going down the one, two, three, fifth Tosfos. We've done actually them all, but this one, Tosfos says a very interesting shaila. Big shaila, and Rosh discusses this. Imagine you're living in a town and a person comes strolling into town and says, "I'm a Yid." Do you have to be choshed that he's not a Yid? You have to be choshed that he's not a Yid. That means like this. You've got no way of verifying him. He lives in town for 6 months and he says, "Oh, can I marry your daughter?" You look, well, it's got good, he looks like a reasonable person. Why not? But how do you know? Could be a good. Unfortunately, this is a very big shaila which can come up. Says there was somebody showing you that proved from this Gemara that you can't believe him that he's a Yid. Because what would the Yid in the Yerushalayim doing, feeding him Korban Pesach? They must have known. How would they feed him Korban Pesach? The answer is he would walk in, stroll into the Azor, and say, "I'm a Yid, give me someone Korban Pesach." So you see that you believe anybody. So Tosfos from here, there's no lie whatsoever. Because there was a unique circumstance with the fact that he was coming Aliyah L'Rega, which 99% of the people were always going to be Yidim. So therefore, with Roiv, and he said he's a Yid. But generally, if a person comes into town, you've got no Roiv that he's a Yid. He has to prove that he's a Yid. So if somebody comes into town and says, "I'm a Yid," he's not believed. And in fact, even if a person says, "I'm a Ger," he's not believed until he can prove that he's a Ger. Tosfos discuss it. We don't have time to go through all this inside. If you look at it, that's an interesting shaila. And the biggest shaila of all is, why did Yehuda ben Beseira not do Aliyah L'Rega? Why did he not go to the Beis Hamikdash? Oh, Tosfos he was old. One pshat in Tosfos he was old. Another pshat in Tosfos is that he lived in Chutz La'aretz. If you live in Chutz La'aretz, you're part from Aliyah L'Rega. And another pshat is he did not own property in Eretz Yisrael. Tosfos got three different mahalchim as to why he didn't do Aliyah L'Rega. Either because of the fact he didn't own property, or was too old to walk, or because of the fact they lived in Chutz La'aretz. And each one of these is discussed at great length, also granted in Chizchiduch and others. It's a big problem. It's a shit in the Gemara in Gittin and in Zokim that very, very, very quickly is that if you pass an ain't breva, there's no such thing as breva, when a person does a Yerusha and he's got more than one son, so the reality is we look at it as a sale because you don't know who was supposed to get which property. So it comes out that the only person that truly owns property in Eretz Yisrael is somebody who has only one son, Ben Achaben, all the time from Yeshua. And the Chizchiduch asks, according to this Tosfos, nobody would be chayv in Aliyah L'Rega. Because only if you've got one son after one son, all the generations would be chayv. Okay, it's getting a bit complicated again. The Yehuda ben Beseira didn't do Aliyah L'Rega. The question is, why not? Tosfos has three different mahalchim, and it comes up actually again later, twice in Pesachim, as to what's going on about when is a person mechuyev to do Korban Pesach. Imagine the Shach comes and we're living in Manchester, we'd be very disappointed if we were told not mechuyev. This is the shaila, when is a person mechuyev or not? Okay, so the Ma'aseh say he managed to, by telling him to ask for the tail, what happened was that Rashi says even more than that, by speaking out of turn, they checked him and found out he was going, got killed. By this Kohen speaking in a derogatory way about the Lechem upon him, he ended up being checked out whether he was a true Kohen, and he ended up losing his whole position as a Kohen altogether. Says the Gemara, Rav Kahana Cholash. Rav Kahana was not one. So they wanted to know how he was. They asked of Yeshua B'Eid Avidi, can you find out how he is? Go and see how he is. He found that unfortunately Rav Kahana was nifta. Now, as we just said, a person has to speak the nicest language possible. Telling over bad news is also not a good thing. Even though people somehow get a pleasure of repeating bad news, people even enjoy hearing bad news, but a person should be aware that it's not the best language. So what did he do? He needed to tell them. He did kriya. He put the kriya to his back that he couldn't sit. He came in crying. So as he died, they realized from the fact that he was crying. He said to them, I never said that. Somebody who gives bad news is a fool. So you are the ones who said it's not me. He didn't want to express the bad news. He found a roundabout way. So Rashi says that was his name. It was a nickname. Tosfos says Chakukor, that's Tosfos, is a sefer, somebody who inscribes chikik. And the others say that the Rebbe explains he came from a city called Chakukor, which is in Yeshua. Nofak Lekrisis. He went out to the villages, to the countryside. He also, when they came to the wheat grow well, they said wanted to know, you've gone out to the countryside, tell us the news, how's the wheat doing? What happened was the wheat had done very, very bad. But again, he didn't want to tell them bad news. So what did he do? He told it to them in a roundabout way. He said to them, the barley's done very well. On Mulay, they said to him, go and announce your details, your news to the horses and donkeys. Rashi and others explain that they were annoyed with him because they felt that that was negative language. Why? We'll see in a minute. That barley and straw is for horses and for chariots. What should he have said? Last year they were good. Or the lentils did well. Meaning like this. When you're trying to avoid something, you have to make sure that this thing you're saying is truly positive. By him saying the barley did well, since only animals eat barley, he actually wasn't giving them good news at all. And he was giving them negative news because the news he was telling them is barley does well, that's only good for animals. So therefore they were upset with him. What he should have said is last year the wheat did well, or lentils did well, which is human food. But just to say that the barley did well, that was negative news, and they were just went. We see over here, I once read a biography of it was Rebbe Kanievsky, but it's very interesting. There's a few of them, but one of them has got a particular chapter, because people used to ask about Shidduchim, has she learned a whole load of phrases of how to speak positively, even about negative things. For example, if somebody was very fat, so she would never say that somebody was fat. She would say things that she's healthy looking, or that she would say she's a happy personality, which she should have, and she would learn. And it's a murdica thing to see. We see from the whole daf basically we had today. The Ola Bas, the first words, what we've done so far regarding Hilchas Pesach, what have we done so far? Is the night of Pesach, do two daf. What we learned, the first night, the night before Pesach, check Chometz. Why use the word not Laila? It says it's all about the language. The person has to, the person's language is a very, very powerful. Chazal tell us that if a person says a klola Talmud Chacham, even if the klola was al tanai on the condition never occurs, it still has an effect. The person has to be very careful with the language that he speaks. With Hashem, we're carrying on tomorrow. Any questions, welcome to. It's nice to see everybody. Ben, Ian, Yehuda, David, I hope you're all doing well.
Well, thank you.
Okay, good night.
Sure.